Aloha. Welcome in, welcome in. A few people connecting. Okay, aloha everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this special edition webinar, preparing for the 2026 hurricane season with the Homeowner's Handbook to prepare for natural hazards. Today's topic is especially timing. Many of us remember the recent Kona Lows that impacted Hawaii, including flooding, high winds, and damage to homes and infrastructure. Looking ahead, forecasters are monitoring a strong El Niño conditions in the Pacific, which can influence weather patterns across our region and contribute to a very active hurricane season. At the same time, new tools are becoming available to help residents better understand their risk. Hwang County's Honolulu Department of Emergency Management recently launched the Oahu Hazard Explorer, which is an interactive online map that allows residents to enter their resident or an address to determine whether it's located within a tsunami evacuation zone, flood zone, etc. Resources like the Oahu Hazard Explorer remind us that preparedness begins with the understanding of the hazards that may affect our homes, families, and communities. So the best time to prepare for an emergency before the storm is on the horizon. I know for me and my household, we just bought a 25-year shelf life of ready-to-eat meals, and we're looking for an apartment-friendly generator. If you have any links to or recommendations, please feel free to DM me. But this brings us to today's webinar, which will explore practical, science-based actions for homeowners to take to reduce risk and improve resilience. So whether you're new to preparedness or looking to update your plans, we hope you leave with useful information that can help protect your family, property, and your community. We are so honored today to have Dennis Hwang with us today. Dennis is a faculty member at the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College Program and NOAA, and the lead author in the Homeowner's Handbook to Prepare for Natural Hazards. So this is a widely used resource that provides practical strategies to help individuals and family reduce harm and risk from hurricanes, flooding, earthquakes, tsunamis, wildfires, and other hazards. So during this meeting, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We will address them at the end of this webinar. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our NDPTC YouTube playlist. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's featured presenter, Dennis Hwang. Dennis, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Amy, and aloha, everyone. Glad you could make it today. I think it's very important that we address preparedness, especially this year. I mean, we should be prepared every year, and they always say it only takes one hurricane, but um, this is very important because of the conditions that may appear to be developing. So with that, I'd like to share my screen and could everyone see that?
We can see the screen.
Okay. So first of all, this is my contact information. I'm with University of Hawaii Sea Grant and my email and cell. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. We work with communities and homeowners. Sometimes we even visit homes like for free on a Saturday. Me and an engineer will go out there and visit a home. So, you know, feel free to contact us. And then a lot of the information is in the Homeowner's Handbook to prepare for natural hazards. We wrote it myself and Darren Okamoto. This is the fourth edition of the book. In 2020, we had 30,000 copies of the book, and now I have like less than 15. So we're in the process of updating it to the fifth edition. The fourth edition was done in 2020, and I could tell you in the process of updating it to the fifth edition, it appears that the risk has increased um, a fair amount for many of the hazards we're dealing with. Okay, so the book covers tsunamis, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, volcanoes, and climate change. Okay, Amy mentioned the Kona lows that we had. Let me just move one thing here. Okay, so this is uh, what a Kona low is. It's actually similar to a hurricane in a way. It's a low pressure system. Um, the air is moving towards the low and rotating in a counterclockwise direction, just like a hurricane. And as the air travels through the ocean, picks up moisture, and then as it approaches the low area, it the air rises, it cools, it condenses, clouds are formed, rain occurs, and so it's similar to a hurricane, except the Kona lows occur during the winter, where the hurricanes are occurring during the summer, and the Kona lows are coming from the west, whereas the hurricanes are coming from the east. So we experienced four winter storms in 2026, one in February, two in March, uh, one in April, and the two Kona lows in March, and they span from March 10th to the 24th. And you could see this is from the National Weather Service, the amount of rainfall. This light purple is over 30 inches of rain, and that's a lot of rain. And it occurred, you could see the south part of the Hawaii County, Maui County, Molokai, East Molokai, and Oahu were impacted heavily. Uh, Not as great for Kauai. And we're going to show you some of the damage. This is some of the flood damage in Wailua. You could see some of these houses. You could see the water levels. So whenever there's flood damage, you kind of get and the water sits, then it creates these water marks. You can see on these two houses, and inside there's a lot of porous material such as drywall, insulation, anything that can't dry, it needs to be removed. And you see, so a lot of people are removing material from their house. And up in the upper right corner, that's the Patsy Mink Park, where they were um, in central Oahu, where they were depositing a lot of the debris. So that's the flood damage from the Kona lows all during this year. And then there was wind damage, actually not from the Kona lows, but from the winter storm that occurred in February of 2026. And over 100 houses had roof damage, reported roof damage, some with the roofs blown off here, and the eaves and especially damage along the corners of the houses. So um, this is just for the winter storms that we had this year, not even during a hurricane. So during a hurricane, we could have similar type of flood damage, but the hurricane's going to be more severe because it's going to have much stronger winds and it's going to have storm surge. Okay, so here's a picture of Hurricane Niki hitting Kauai in 1992. You could see that the eye is located right over Kauai. So a lot of people on Oahu, because we've been doing education and outreach since 2007. A lot of people on Oahu would think, "Oh, Aniki wasn't that bad. We're prepared. We survived Aniki," but Oahu did not get the brunt of the forces from Aniki. Only Kauai did, and even on Kauai, there was a great variation in the impact, and I'll explain that shortly. But our worst case scenario is a system like Aniki hitting Oahu, because whereas uh, seven, six or seven house out, 6 or 7 thousand houses were damaged on Kauai when Iniki hit, Oahu has 8 times more structures. So if it turned 6 hours earlier, there could have been up to 50,000 houses damaged or destroyed. So this, you may have heard that they have predicted an El Nino for this summer, and actually a strong El Nino and possibly a super El Nino. So this diagram just shows the tropical cyclone activity in around Hawaii from 1970 to 2025, and the El Nino years are in red. The La Nina years are in blue, and you can see that during El Nino, there's much more activity. In 82, they had 10 tropical cyclones, and one of them, Hurricane Eva, hit um, Kauai in 92. Um, they originally classified 92 as an El Nino, then they changed it to neutral, just by it appeared to be in transition. But during 1992, we had Hurricane Iniki hitting Kauai. And then you'll notice that in 2015, uh, there are 16 tropical cyclones in 2015. So, and that's what they said is attributed to what they call a super El Nino. So, but just for the people who aren't familiar with these terms, um, an La Nina and El Nino are two conditions um, that develop in the Pacific Basin. They oscillate back and forth between 2 and 7 years apart, and El Nino is when the trade winds weaken, and then it warm water collects along the eastern Pacific, and that's the breeding ground for hurricanes. So that's why the activity is higher during El Nino years. So you may have heard last month in May, they predicted the National Weather Service predicted 5 to 13 tropical cyclones for this year. And that's, first of all, that's a lot. And secondly, it's a wide range. So why the wide range? It's because they don't know how fast El Nino is going to develop. If it develops quicker and stronger, we're probably going to have like towards the high range of that number. Whereas if it develops slower, we could have uh, at the low end of that prediction. So remember, 2015 is when we had the last super El Nino with 16 tropical cyclones. That's 2015. So in 2015, this is what the sea surface temperature looked like. Okay. It was very warm. The red orange colors indicate warmer temperatures. And it's not only along the equator, but along the eastern uh, Pacific here. And again, this is like the breeding ground for hurricanes, and it impacted Hawaii. That's why we had 16 tropical cyclones that year in 2015. Also in 2015. So for the first time, we had three major hurricanes in the Central Pacific at the same time. That never happened before. We're very fortunate that during that year, 2015, although there were 16 systems, we never were really impacted. But we can't always count on that, so we really need to be prepared. Here's another reason to be prepared. Okay, so this is from the Climate Prediction Center, and this is online. Go to El Nino Climate Prediction Center. You could Google that and get to this website. They have a prediction for every month. Okay, so when National Weather Service predicted 5 to 13 tropical cyclones, that was in May. But in the June forecast, you could see the El Nino is developing um, very rapidly. So in the May forecast, the strong and very strong El Nino was 42% of the prediction. But in the June forecast, and this is of the June forecast, the strong to very strong um, uh, prediction is at 70%. Okay, so it's gone from 42% to 70%. They indicate that the El Nino is already here, and you know it's going to be stronger than they thought in May. Okay, so how do we prepare? So one of the first things you need to do is make sure you go to your county emergency management website. And I'm not sure in this audience are how many people are on Oahu, or there are people from Kauai or the other uh, counties, but each county emergency management agency has their own mass notification system. That's how you get emergency notifications by email or text. Okay. And you have to register and sign up for these notifications. So for Honolulu, it's hnlalert.gov. You go if you're on Honolulu, go to their website also, honolulu.gov/DEM. Okay, Kauai, their mass notification system is the WEN system, wireless emergency notification system. And by the way, after this talk, I'm going to convert this PowerPoint to a PDF, and we'll DPTC and Amy will send it to all the attendees today. So you'll be able to get these website links in case most people will know them already, but there are a lot of people from the community that may be attending this talk and they may not be familiar. So for Kauai, go to the WEN system. Maui, go to the Maui County government and sign up for MEMA alerts. And for Hawaii County, go to the Hawaii County Civil Defense Agency website and sign up for the Everbridge app and get notifications through their system. Okay, in terms of food, okay, there's the general guideline is supposed to have 14 days non-perishable food and water. Okay, so a lot of times people don't have those supplies and the three most common reasons. One, they didn't know about the guideline. Well, you know now. Two, um, it may be there could be space requirements that are hard to meet, and the third is cost requirements. So the handbook has tips on how to collect your supplies with reducing space and cost requirements. So in terms of water, for instance, you're supposed to have 1 gallon per person per day for 14 days. So for a family of four, they're supposed to have 56 gallons of water. Okay. And if you look at a case of water at Costco, for instance, that's 5.3 gallons. So that's 11 cases. That's very hard to do. Okay. But, you could prepare, you could get these sanitized plastic containers that hold water. And also, a lot of counties have emergency fairs every summer. Go to those fairs because a lot of times they give out these containers for free to attendees. Okay. Also, you get these water bobs that hold 100 gallons of water. They're like a bathtub liner, and you could get them at Amazon or Hardware Hawaii or City Mill or and it's a 100 gallons is a fair amount of water. So that's one way to reduce space requirements. In terms of food, some tips we have for food. buy food you will normally use. So if you don't eat Vienna sausage, don't put it in your emergency kit because it's just going to expire and you're going to have to throw it away. So you want to get food that you normally use, have a long shelf life, mark the expiration with a Sharpie because a lot of times the expiration dates are in fine print and you may overlook it. And 1 year before the food expires, start to consume it. And if it is about to expire, donate it to the food bank. Um, this 14-day guideline, it may be hard for some people to accumulate that much food, but accumulate as much as you can. For some people it's who can easily accumulate this food, maybe accumulate more, and then you'll have extra for your neighbors or friends or whatever. Okay, so important to prepare, and we want to do it now. So get your supplies now. We shouldn't have to wait like before a warning to go to the store to get supplies. Okay. Um, for we also There's also some tips in the handbook for creating an evacuation kit. I'm not You could see the items that are in there, and you go to the county website, they'll also have tips on evacuation kits. You'll need an evacuation kit, especially if you're in a tsunami evacuation zone or in a high-risk flood zone or a coastal storm surge zone. Um, but you may also need it for in case of a fire. So um, now's the time to create your evacuation kit. Okay. And then the other thing too is emergency plans. Okay. Um, I always think the most important thing about an emergency plan is knowing where you're going to go. Okay. You need to know where you're going to go for a tsunami versus where you're going to go for a hurricane. Okay. And on the upper diagram, there's the tsunami evacuation maps. Okay. Only use those for tsunami, not for a hurricane. And you may know that there's two tsunami evacuation zones. So if they call a tsunami warning, you're supposed to evacuate the red area and go to the yellow and green area. If they call an extreme tsunami evacuation zone, extreme tsunami evacuation warning, you're supposed to evacuate the red and yellow area and go into the green area. And you should know where your house is, where you work or go to school, or your house is relative to these zones and how you could easily get out of those zones. Okay. That's for a tsunami. You also need an evacuation plan, emergency plan for a hurricane. Okay. So for a hurricane, there's a triple threat. There's coastal flooding and uh, inland flooding and coastal storm surge. Okay, so here's the flood maps for this is Wailupi Peninsula on the south shore of Oahu. Okay, you can see that the flood map indicates a stream is a threat. Okay, but uh, the peninsula is not a threat. But the coastal storm surge map indicates that the peninsula is at risk, but the stream is not. That's why you need to look at both maps when you make your plan for a hurricane. In terms of tsunami um, emergency evacuation planning, um, this is the last slide we're going to discuss about that. But there's a video that 16-minute video covers a lot of that, and there's a QR code to watch that video, along with the QR code for the homeowner's handbook. Okay, but in terms of hurricane emergency planning, again, there's a triple threat. There's wind, strong wind, coastal storm surge, and inland flooding. So for a hurricane, this is the example of a Nike hitting Kauai. Okay, so the system the rotational winds are at roughly 120 miles per hour counterclockwise, and the system is moving forward at 30 miles per hour. So in the right front quadrant, the forward speed and the rotational speed add together, and it is 150 miles per hour. Whereas in the left front quadrant, the rotational speed uh, and the forward speed subtract, and it's 90 miles per hour. So it's almost a category 4 hurricane here and a category 1 hurricane here. That's why there's a tremendous variation, even on Kauai, on the impacts of the wind in that area. Okay. Also in the right front quadrant, that is where you get your coastal storm surge. The winds are pushing onto the coastline. There's no coastal storm surge on the left part of the hurricane. Okay. And then, of course, you're going to get a lot of rainfall in the same way that we explained about the Kona Lows, how the warm air is moving towards the center and rising, and it cools and then condenses and rains forms, rain bands form, so you get your inland flooding. So remember that triple threat from a hurricane, because each one of these threats could prevent you from staying in a house, for instance. Okay, this is to reiterate some of that what we covered before. Okay, here are your flood maps. Here's your storm surge maps. You need to look at both because this peninsula is the flood map shows the peninsula is safe, but the stream is not, and the storm surge map shows the peninsula is at risk, but the stream is not. Okay, so look at both, and you need to wait for instructions from your local emergency management agency because this storm surge map is a worst case scenario. It assumes that the hurricane, the right front quadrant of that hurricane is going to hit the south shore of this part of the island, okay? And you may get an example like this, okay? So here's Lane in 2018 coming from the south. Okay, if it's coming from the south, there's a chance a right front quadrant could hit the south shore of Oahu, and then coastal storm surge could be a risk. But if it's coming from the east, like Douglas in 2020, you're not going to get coastal storm surge on the south shore of Oahu. That's why you need to make sure you're tuned into your county emergency management agency and listen to their instructions before, during, and after an event. Okay. Yeah. They also use those uh, instructions, mass notification system. Remember for the Kona Lows, when there was a threat of Wailua Dam overflowing, they had a mass notification for evacuation from the dam evacuation zone in Wailua. So remember that. Now, the last thing for a hurricane, okay, even though you're not in a flood zone, high risk flood zone, high risk flood zone means you're in an A or a V zone, okay? You may not be in a high risk flood zone. You may not be in a coastal storm surge zone, but you still may need to evacuate your house because of the wind. Okay, so here's the shelter in place table in the homeowner's handbook. Remember the story about the three little pigs and houses made of straw, wood, and stone? Well, here's a single wall house, double wall house, and a stone or essentially a concrete or CMU wall house. Okay, so this is the strongest, followed by this and this. And you can see on the bottom, it says unsafe, marginal, good, better, best. Okay. So the idea is to find out where your house is, whether it's single wall, double wall, or concrete. And the first thing you need to do is put it in good condition. Okay. So you can't have termite damage, wood rot, corrosion of fasteners. If you have any of those things, your house is going to be weaker. Okay. But if it's in good condition, that's one step to the right. You're trying to move everything to the right. The other thing is we recommend initially for, especially for older houses, to add hurricane clips. We're going to cover that. And then window protection and foundation upgrades. If you do all those things, you may be able to make a single wall house good enough for a category one hurricane. You can only make an older house so strong, but you can make it significantly stronger than it currently is. Okay. Double wall house, you could make it up to a category two or three, and a stone house, you can make it up to a category three. Okay. So a lot of these items, hurricane clips, window protection, foundation upgrades, roof, we're going to cover shortly because they're all in the handbook. Those are upgrades you could do to move your house to the right. Okay. So this is a city block in Rockport, Texas, after Hurricane Harvey hit in 2017. Okay. Harvey was a category four hurricane. So we were there assessing damage for a week or maybe 10 days. Wind damage in Rockport, flood damage in Houston, and you could see that this one block, it's all in the same block. There's houses that were destroyed, and then they had some with major damage where the roof deck is coming off the trusses, some with moderate damage, primarily along the edges and corners of the roof. We're going to talk about that shortly. And then there's houses with no damage, okay, minor or no damage. So why does this house have minor or no damage? It was built with modern building codes, had a continuous load path connection. We're going to cover that shortly. It has a strong roof and opening window protection. Okay. So great variation in performance in how a house is constructed and how it performed during a category four hurricane. Okay, so let me play this. Okay, so that house, this actually happened in 2021. It wasn't even a hurricane. It was just 30 or 40 mile per hour sustained winds, and then there was some topographic amplification. But you've but that's during a high wind event, but not as strong as a hurricane. But during a hurricane, something like this will happen throughout all, if it hits one of the islands, it'll happen throughout the whole island. Okay. And you've already seen examples of this roof damage from this event in 2021, and also the slides we showed earlier that showed roof damage uh, from the February winter storm this year. Okay, so that just shows how vulnerable some of our older houses are, and here's some more damage from um, roof damage from this occurred from February of 2026 from one of the winter storms just before the two Kona lows. Okay, so we had blown soffits. Of course, we had roofs blown off. We had loose shingles, leaking roofs, and then asphalt shingles coming off roofs. Okay, so once for older material like an asphalt shingle, once it's over 20 years old, the UV sort of like dries out all the oil in the shingle, and it loses flexibility and strength, and it becomes more vulnerable to damage from wind. So um, to we're going to talk now about how we're going to make houses stronger. So one of the things, I remember one of the things that house that survived in Rockport, okay, um, it had a continuous load path. Okay, so a continuous load path is essentially tying the roof all the way down to the foundation. So each intersection has a connection. Say the roof is tied to the wall with this hurricane clip, and then the double top plate is tied to the stud with this strap. The second floor is tied to the first floor with another strap. The stud is tied to the uh, mud sill with this other strap, and then the mud sill is tied to the foundation with this anchor bolt. So it's essentially, it's almost like you're throwing a chain over the roof of the house and tying it down, holding everything um, in place. But instead of that being external, it's all internal through the building codes. Okay. So if it's not done, if it's not done internally through the building codes, it could be done as a retrofit. Okay. So here, and it's done from the outside. Okay. So here's an example where they do it from the outside, tying this uh, truss to this beam here. The beam is tied to the columns tied to the foundation. Okay. So the weakest part of the house and generally the load path is this roof to wall connection. That's what the hurricane tie is for. And we've already seen just 3 examples of the roofs blown off for not even hurricane conditions. Okay, here's again more examples of the roofs blowing off. This is during Niki, 2 different houses, and that's the video you just saw. And to deal with that, the retrofit is um, is to tie the roof trusses to the wall with this hurricane tie. It's called the Hawaiʻi plantation tie. It's a very simple retrofit. If if you're handy and you could get the initial guidance from a licensed architect or structural engineer, you could probably do it in 2 Saturdays with $300 or $400 in material cost, or hire a licensed contractor. It'll cost around $2,500. We think, and these are the different types of hurricane clips. We think around 10,000 houses around the state have been retrofitted already. Okay. A lot of houses, they have post and pier structures. Uh, they they have a large concrete block and then a second block called a tofu block, and then this post. And a lot of times just sitting on the connected by friction. There's no connectors, but there's a step-by-step guide in the handbook on how to do this retrofit. It's very important for hurricane, reducing hurricane risk and earthquake risk. Okay. The other thing you want to do is protect your windows or openings. Remember that house in Rockport had 3 things: a load path, a strong roof, and window protection. Well, here's an example. You have the wind exerting pressure on the house from the outside, but here there's an opening that's either the window broke or someone opened the window. So do not open your windows, no masking tape. Okay, but here there's a breach, and then that causes internal pressurization, and you get double the uplift pressure on your roof from the outside and inside. It's more likely to blow up. Okay, so in the book, there's 10 different ways to protect your windows. Plywood's the cheapest and most readily available, but it's also heavy. It's a polycarbonate material. It's becoming more popular. It's just as strong as plywood, but lighter. And here's accordion shutters. This is a house in Kaimaki, and this is impact resistant windows, always in place. This is what they use in Florida, and has hurricane protection and burglar protection. Okay, so in the book, there's 10 different ways to protect your windows. The trade-off is cost. Plywood's the cheapest. Impact-resistant windows is the most expensive, but it has the advantage, has no time to deploy, whereas plywood takes the most time to deploy. But you don't need to do all of one thing for all of your house. You can mix and match it. You could do one thing on the first floor and something different on the second floor. Okay. For roofing, this is the most important part of your house. Okay. So you want the roof to be strong, class H shingles for wind resistance, You want to make sure your roof is tied down to the foundation. Remember with the hurricane clips, proper attachment of the roof deck and roofing material, and the shingles and roof should be wind rated. That's what you ideally you should have. You want to make sure your roof is sealed. I'll show you why. You want to make sure your roof is cool, reduce energy cost, and you want to make sure it's fire resistant. So Class A shingles for fire resistance. It could be shingles or a metal roof. And all of this could be done at one time with just simple selection of materials. Okay, these are different types of roof damage, roof blow off, roof deck coming off the trusses, shingles coming off the roof deck, and soffits and wall covering blowing off. So to deal with the roof deck coming off, if people re-roof their house, and we don't recommend people just re-roofing, but if your roof has reached the end of its useful life, or you're going to put solar in, a lot of people then re-roof, and when you do, it's just maybe 10% extra in costs to make it as strong as the recommendations that are in this that we're covering. Okay, so one is to reattach it with ring shank nails from the roof deck into the trusses. Okay. Also, you want to make sure your roof is sealed. This is why. So when the shingles blow off, you can see this is after Hurricane Ida in Louisiana. You can see the light rays in between the plywood deck on the roof. Okay, when the light is coming through the plywood deck, water is going to come through also during the hurricane. Okay, so and when that happens, the water drips down along the ceiling. It um, it saturates all the porous material. It could be drywall, insulation, and then it all needs to be removed. Yeah. So seal your roof deck. There's three different ways to seal your roof deck. One is to use a modified asphalt bitumen layer over the entire roof, such as over here and here. Another way is to use that modified bitumen tape along the joints. This is only could be good if you have a plywood roof deck. A lot of people have a tongue and groove roof deck, and then you can't use a tape. You would use something like this membrane here layer. Okay, and then on your roof, the weakest parts. A lot of times, roof damage occurs along the corners and edges of the roof. The corners could be have 3 times more force than the center, and the edges 2 times more force than the center. So when you put your roof on, put like extra dabs of asphalt cement along the edges of the roof. This is all in the handbook. Okay. Finally, we're going to just talk about flooding really quickly. So this is in the North Shore, Wailua. These are during the Kona Lows in March of 2026. And again, another house, you could see the watermarks and had to clear out the debris from the house. Okay, this is why you have to clear out the debris. Okay, so and you have to gut the walls. So here you could see in Louisiana, um, the water level is here, and they didn't dry it out quick enough. And what it's essentially happened is the moisture wicked up the wall, and you could see all the mold along the wall there. So a lot of times, if there's, say, a foot or two of flooding, they usually got it 2 to 4 feet above where the water level is. We recommend if there's frequent flooding to replace it with flood-resistant materials such as plastic polymer wall or fiber cement. Okay, and it's this instance, if this area got flooded again, you would just take the panels off, clean them, um, clean behind there, dry it out, and then reattach them. Okay. Finally, insurance, very important. There's hurricane insurance, and you can think of that for water damage from the top down from a hurricane. Flood insurance is water damage from the ground up. It could be from a hurricane, okay? It could also be from a tsunami, a large winter storm, a stream flooding, but water damage from the ground up, that's when you need flood insurance. And homeowners insurance you need for theft, liability, fire, but also wind that's not a hurricane or tropical cyclone. So when the Kona Lows occurred and there was flood damage, it's not covered on a hurricane insurance, it's covered on your homeowner's insurance. Okay. And a lot of the retrofits that we recommend in the book have discounts, roof to wall 10%, windows 15, 18%. This is off your hurricane insurance. Wall to foundation connections 10 to 12%. It could be cumulative. Um, Here's a house in Pearl City. It has roof to wall ties and the roof post and pier retrofit, so it has a load path, and it was able to reduce hurricane insurance premiums an equivalent of $600. So um, retrofits lower insurance premiums, work with your insurance agent to make sure you're getting some type of discount. And they also, retrofits also add strength and to the house and make it possibly a place to shelter in place. And it also adds value to the house. Okay, so here's the last slide. Just a summary of things for this hurricane season. You know, gather your emergency supplies, 14 days. Get emergency alerts. Go to your, and this is for Honolulu, but whatever county you're in, get your mass notification alerts by registering to the proper app with your county emergency management agency. Make an emergency plan. The key is to know your zone, hazard zone, and know where you're going to go for, say, a tsunami versus a hurricane. And then on your house, do simple maintenance, clear debris, clutter, and junk in your yard and house. That'll protect you from wind and wildfire. Clear gutters, downspouts, and drainage ways. Protect you from wildfire and flooding. Prevent wood damage, wood rot, termite damage for the wind. Older houses, add hurricane clips and see the handbook for more tips. And then check your insurance coverage. May seem like a lot to cover, but the key thing is to do a little gradually over time. And you could make a big difference by just starting today and doing some of the key things that are in here. Okay. So that's all I want to have to cover for today. And
Oh, really great job.
uh, thank you.
Hey,
It took a little longer, but there's a lot to cover. Yeah.
no worries, no worries. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute or put it in the chat. I will say this meeting is being recorded again, so if you missed the beginning or want to watch any of our past Third Thursday specials, we do have our NDPTC YouTube playlist, which I will put in the chat. And I know we already had a question in the chat, so I'll read that before I ask my question. But we had a question from Tracy. What businesses sell 3/4 plastic honeycomb 4x8 panels?
Okay. The panels are sold in 4x8 sheets, just like plywood. Okay. There are two places you could get them. One is Hardware Hawaiʻi, and I'm not quite sure. I mean, Hardware Hawaiʻi is on Oahu. It may be a little more difficult if you're on some of the other islands. But hardware, I think you could try and mail order them also. But and that's if you're going to try and do the installation yourself. If you are, you could use some of the guidance in the handbook and storm panel screws that are also in the handbook. Feel free to contact us. The other place that also uses polycarbonate panels is All Island Roll Shutter. That's a licensed contractor, a company, and they do installation for polycarbonate panels. The other thing to remember, the contractors are very busy now because a combination of the Kona low damage and the concern about this year's hurricane activity forecast. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Dennis, I was wondering, based on your experience, what is the most overlooked preparation action that people take or homeowners typically overlook?
Okay, I think the most overlooked thing is the emergency plan because a lot of the guidance says make a plan, and they say, okay, yeah, they do need to make a plan, and they need to be able to contact everyone in their family, and have a contact on the on ideally a contact on the mainland. But the key thing that's overlooked is where are you going to go during this event? Okay. So you need to think about this beforehand. Okay. Is your house strong enough? Where you're staying, is it strong enough for the wind, or if you're in a flood zone or coastal storm surge zone? If it's not, you need to either go to a friend or relative's place that is strong enough, and that's something you need to think about beforehand. Another good place is a steel reinforced concrete building. Okay. It could be where you work. It could be a friend or relative that lives in a condominium. Okay. And then as a last resort, a public shelter, public shelter that your county has. Okay. That's the most overlooked thing. People don't really think about where they're going to go during an event. Yeah. And it's a lot of it's in the handbook again, where that shelter in place. And when I was talking about the shelter in place table, that's where it's covered. And they need to don't overestimate the strength of your house. Okay. Because only around even a single wall house that has, we think there's 10,000 houses in the state that have been retrofitted with hurricane clips. But, if it's single wall house, and if they have window protection, they're probably good up to a weak category 1, but they still need to know about where they're going to go if something stronger is going to happen. Yeah.
Hmm. I did post the link to that handbook in the chat again in case you missed it the first go around. I will be saving the chat and sharing it afterward with the presentation and any of the links as well. So if you need to run, we did have a couple people already jump off. We are kind of close to the top of the hour, but we do have time for some more questions. Please feel free to unmute or drop it in the chat. While we wait, I would like to mention that NDPTC is offering 4 of its courses in person, back to back, from July 13th through the 16th at UH Manoa at the Campus Center. So I'll post that link in the chat along with a little bit more information on what's going to be offered which day and where you can register. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the team or myself. So hearing none. Dennis, I would just like to say mahalo again for coming and talking to us. I personally do not have a house here, but even I got a lot out of this
Yeah.
presentation. And I realized after the Kona Low, I am not as prepared as I thought I was, especially
Okay.
with my background. So I
And
definitely appreciated your time.
could I just mention one more thing?
Of
Two
course.
things. Feel free to contact us if you need any more information. We're very open to answering questions from the community. And for condo owners, um, generally, I think you're in good shape. Remember the three little pigs, straw, wood, stone. You're in a stone building, right? So remember that, and especially if you're, um, the guidance for uh, a tsunami is you go to the fourth floor above on a 10-story steel reinforced concrete building. That's because the taller the building, the stronger it is. And if it's steel reinforced concrete, it's strong. So if you're in a condo, steel reinforced concrete, stay there. And even just stay away from the windows, go in the bathroom, the hallway, or whatever. And also, if you have friends or relatives that maybe they don't have a good place, invite them to your place to weather the event. Otherwise, they may have to go to a public shelter. Yeah.
Dennis, we did get another question from Deborah who asked, what about a two-story townhome?
Depends, depends where it's located and also when it was built. Okay, because like a two-story town, like is the townhome near a stream or a coast? First, I'm going to assume that it's away from a high-risk flood zone, an A or a V zone. Okay, and then when was it built? Okay, if it was built after 95, it's probably stronger. It's probably, and if it's concrete, it's probably even stronger. But if it's wood frame, it's not. So it's and like if it was built after 95, it has a load path, but probably not much else. So um, find out more about your building and what it has. You may even ask your building owner if they could do retrofits on their plate on the condo. Yeah. Like, yeah.
Deborah says thank you. And Dennis, I encourage you to check out the chat. We're having a lot of people saying mahalo and thank you for your informative with focus on reasonable, practical actions. And
Okay.
Mary shared a comment. One of the biggest danger here in New Jersey is trees falling on homes.
Yes. And that's why I encourage all homes to have hurricane insurance, even though because my house is pretty strong, but there's still trees of my neighbors across my neighbor's place that could fall on our house. So that's why there's always residual risk. And that's why we encourage every house to have hurricane insurance. Yeah.
Well, Dennis, it's almost the top of the hour, so I just want to say mahalo, 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 and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending and good luck for the season. Yeah.
Again, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. We will continue with our third Thursday in August. We're taking a break for the training event that NDPTC is hosting. So please check out our links and our resources, and I will follow up after the meeting. Mahalo. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.